Fellow business brokers, whether you're just getting started or you've been in the business for a long time and you're looking just to reflect and improve your skills and ideas, I hope this is useful to you. And this is based on a lot of work that I've done in the past and sharing to build a community of brokers and intermediaries on a worldwide basis. This is Brian Stevens with BuyBizUSA and the Legacy Venture Group. And I encourage you to reach out to our website, BuyBizUSA. You can find our contact information. If you got ideas, you want to share things, you want to give a critique or say, hey, I got a better idea than what you've got, I'd love to hear the feedback. I'd love to hear the collaboration. If you're an attorney or accountant or somebody that's sort of calling on business owners but not really in the industry and you'd like to join forces as well, I'd love to reach out, hear from you, regardless of where you are on this incredible planet Earth. We're going to talk today a little bit about sellers' expectations. And there's an awful lot to cover here. I'm going to try and keep these kind of short and sweet, but realize this isn't exhaustive. This is just the beginning of really important stuff, realizing that when you get to meet a client that you're going to represent, there's a lot of expectations that they need to understand, and to be honest and full of integrity and rock solidness is going to pay off by far in the long run. Realize that at first they might not understand you, not know what they share, what to trust you on, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that will help you really do extremely well with your listings. So one of the first things I would encourage people to realize that when they go to sell a business, for at least so many of them, it's a life-changing event. Realize that some people might be doing this for just a short period of time, that is owning a business and getting rid of it, but so many of our clients have been in industry for 10, 20, 30, 40. We just recently closed on a business that the owner had it for nearly 50 years, and it was really an emotional thing. They knew that they wanted to get out for sure, but they realized it, and at the same time, it was something that they were trying to face emotionally, realizing that they wanted to control as much as what they could happen, and at the same time they realized that a new owner was going to change things as well. I also had a deal about 6 or 7 months before this that the seller had gotten the price and the buyer and everything right, and at the last minute at the closing table he just pulled away. I can't do this, he said. I can't do it. And then 5 or 6 months later, probably talked to his wife or realized that he wasn't getting any younger. I'm not sure what, but he called back and said, hey, could you find that buyer? I'm ready to go. I just had to deal with some of that stuff inside myself. Realized that I had to let go, and I'm really ready to do that. So realize it can be an emotionally led experience for your client. So don't let your emotions get in the way if they seem to be, in a funny mood or going back and forth or waffling, but try and get to them at a point where you can understand what is important to them and understand it can be just more than just money. Money is usually a big factor, sometimes a major factor, but there might be other things. You need to be a leader. They're going to look at you to make this happen for them and understand it. They might know their business. They might act like they really know all about what's involved in selling a business, but the vast majority of people that you're going to work with have never sold a business before. They might know so much, maybe everything about heating and air conditioning or distribution or manufacturing or running a pizza restaurant or whatever it is, but you need to be the leader and get their respect and share with them all the different things that they're going to expect. And one of the key things is to put everything together. We have a whole video presentation on some of the things that you need to put together in terms of representing the business, but collect all the data you can. Look at the last 3, maybe 5 years profit and loss statements, balance sheets, tax returns, what's going on in the industry, contracts, details, etc. Get all that together. The details of that is in a future or a different presentation, but realize that there's a lot to collect on it. Get to know the company, check out their website, identify the things that they tell you, look for the things they don't want to tell you. Some of the most interesting things are the things that they might not want to tell you up front, and getting them to share with you is going to be a matter of building trust. Get to know what's important to them, get to know who they are, give them some time to warm up to you, give them a good reason. We even have a non-disclosure agreement that we share saying, hey, we're not going to share any information. We'll maintain confidentiality. Of course, once we become your representative, you might have more information that we have to share with the public, but we will reach out and say, we understand that there's a lot of private information you need to share with us, and we are the people that you can talk to and give us your trust and reflect things out there and be that person for them. Show a lot of integrity. If you say you're going to do something, do it. If you need to reach out to them, if you realize that, hey, they're asking for $1 bazillion and you can only get them $500 million, say, hey, it might cost me getting you the listing, but I can only get you $500 million or whatever it is out there. Show integrity. Give them a reason to trust you. It's a scary thing. They might have a lot of reasons why they're hesitant. Maybe they've got some tax issues that they don't want to tell you about or some cash on the books. That's okay. Find out what you can find out and know what you can represent. Maybe they're a little realizing that, hey, I've been running this business for 40 years, but I'm not as hip as I should be on marketing or internet marketing or search engine optimization. And they might feel kind of, nervous about, hey, I don't know all these things. Make them feel comfortable to talk to you. Say, oh, that's cool. If you've done this for a while, you're going to have seen an awful lot of all the different things going on. And it's okay. Nobody's perfect. Nothing's just right. And things need to be as well represented as they possibly can, and understand that. That leads to another thing. I try to identify the potential hurdles. We use a term that we've stolen from other brokers out there. Go ugly early. And in that process, what we're saying is, if you got some things that are going to be a challenge and people have signed the non-disclosure and they're going to get to it, it's okay to be saying, hey, by the way, here's the situation. Their main manager is retiring in the next year or two, or leaving with the company. Tell that early on in the process, far better than to get 4 months down the road, get ready to do the closing, and they actually run into the manager who says, oh, by the way, I'm quitting at closing. If you can deal with the issues early on, and there are issues, that's okay. You need to help identify what those potential hurdles might be from the seller. And again, that involves building trust, getting that information from them and talking to them, saying, hey, what are the things that somebody buying this business might run into that might be uncomfortable? And how can we talk about it? Because early on in the process, you got a manager as an example who's leaving. You could say, well, could we bring somebody else in? Is there somebody you could start to groom that's next in command? And they might say, well, actually, yeah, I got this one kid that's showing a lot of promise and loves work in this industry and knows all that stuff. So you can begin to identify the potential hurdles and start to think about solutions that might be useful in the process. If you are getting involved in something and you're excited about it, but you're realizing that you just don't know enough about this particular type of industry, it doesn't mean you can't work on it. Maybe that's where you go through International Business Brokers Association, or a statewide organization, or reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm dealing with this company and it's a little larger or it's a little different than what I'm used to. I like to make my commission, but maybe I could share some of that with you if you'd be willing to help me along, because I see that you've got this profile of selling this one particular type of dental laboratory or medical distribution company or what have you. Don't be afraid to do a great job with harmonizing with somebody that's got a lot of knowledge. And again, you owe it to your clients, you owe it to yourself to go through and be successful by being knowledgeable. Don't try to just be the heroes for a song. Another important thing is to sit with your seller and say, hey, what are these issues that we're going to be dealing with? And they might they might wonder, what have I got to know? What have I got to do besides, show up at the closing table and sell my business? And there's a lot of different things. I'll go a few things. They need to talk about non-compete. Hey, you're 74 years old, you're selling your business, and yet you only want to sign that you'll stay out of the industry for 1 year. Why? Well, what's going on with that? That's crazy. Let them feel comfortable, the buyer feel comfortable that you're going to stay out for good, or for 5 to 7 years, or whatever the state allows as a non-compete terminology. And the distance, I've seen people that really want to get out, they're ready to retire, and yet they say, well, I don't want to do 5-mile radius or something like that. It's crazy. Have them think through from the perspective of the buyer how this is going to look. Talk about how the terms and pricing might work, and identify how to price the business and what they can really expect. Talk about what the transition of training is going to be like. A lot of guys will say, well, I'm not going to stick around after the closing, or I'll only give a week or two, and the business can be really complicated. Or they say, well, then I need to be paid $10,000 a month. In general, find out what would be a good idea for the normal person that's going to buy this business, what it's going to take for them to at least get their feet on the ground and get their head wrapped around the business, and then talk to the seller and say, look, you don't want to go and make things so uncomfortable for that they have to pay this extra money. Let's reach out to, if you think your business will take a month for them to transition over, include a price that's going to include you working there for that time period. Of course, if they do ask for some really crazy extenuated times, let's put a price on that too, but don't start off with, going a la carte and asking for a few dollars here and a few dollars there. Give them a price they can work with, that they can go to the bank, hopefully, with, and work that whole thing. Help them understand what's going to happen with due diligence early on in this process. As part of you taking the listing and doing your research, which I mentioned early on, you need to go through the due diligence process as if a buyer is going to look through and go, well, what's this and what's that? If you don't know what those what ifs and those curious things and those odd things on the tax returns and the P&Ls, or the fact that they have to have a special license or whatever, you need to be prepared. Do the due diligence early on. Have the buyer put everything together in one place, so that as due diligence begins, this is assuming now that a buyer has come to an agreement with the seller and they've got a written agreement down, whether it's in a letter of intent or as an asset purchase agreement or some other terms that use these same terminologies. Realize that it's important that the seller is prepared to provide these documents to the prospective buyer or to the person that's actually buying the business now, because they're due diligence. So one of the worst things that can happen, and they have the term that you might have heard, time kills deals, right? One of the worst things can be to say, hey, can you get me a copy of the lease? And can you get me a copy of an example of one of your contracts for taking on a new client? And then the seller disappearing for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, going, oh, I can't find this, and all that sort of stuff. It really weakens the trust of the buyer to seller. So you're doing your professional job by saying to the seller, hey, here's what you need to have. If you can get bank financing, that's going to be so important too. SBA lending, sometimes non-conventional lenders. Understand who the advisors are. And one of the things I encourage you to do is to try and work out all the details that you can possibly do before this gets to the point where the lawyers on the buyer side and seller side are hashing it out. First of all, that ramps up the expenses to the seller and to the buyer unnecessarily. It also exposes the deal more so because the attorneys are going to want to do a good job and show what they're made of and show their mettle and protect their people. But sometimes they kill the deals because they're getting into too much of the weeds of ego. Go through the process and try to minimize as much of all the challenges that are going to be there between the buyer and seller. And so when you're advising your seller, you talk to them and say, here are the challenges and how are we going to deal with this? What do you think? And if you need to run it up the flagpole with your attorney in terms of, hey, what if I hold financing, or what if I do this, or what if I do that? Get that out of the way early on in the conversation before the clash of the titans are occurring with the attorneys. There's times when they need to have attorneys. And by the way, I always recommend to both the buyers and sellers multiple times and in writing, when you're in doubt, go see an attorney, and when you're in doubt, go see an accountant. That's really, really important. Another thing might be, as an example, and this is just a short list of those things that you need to work out, the franchise agreement. Find out what the franchisor is looking for. I dealt with a franchisor one time, and I was totally shocked that they didn't work with anybody that didn't have a green card. Whereas other franchises are like, oh, if they're from England, that's great, or Canada, that's great. As long as they have the credit, the background, the experience, and the qualities, we'll work with them. So find out what are the requirements of the landlord, the franchisee, or the banks, etc. Okay? Landlords are a big issue, and you need to find out what the issues are going to be. You should get a copy of the lease of the client that you're working with, your seller, and read through the lease. Do they have extensions? Do they have terms? Maybe you reach out to the landlord and say, hey, and sometimes the sellers don't want you to talk to the landlord, but you need to find out, if you've got a lease that's only there for 3 years remaining, what are the chances of getting something that's going to extend out for 10 years or more? And that's especially important for SBA loans, because SBA loans like to link up the amount of options, at least on the lease, with the length of the loan. And a 7A loan, the typical traditional just business loan, usually goes for 10 years. But you also need to know what other issues there might be in that lease, and there could be a number of them. Get to read them, get to study them, and understand it well. You want to minimize risk. You want to manage things. Don't leave it to chance. Don't overlook over anything early on in the process and then realize, oh my gosh, I really never found out that we can't do SBA financing, or we can't get beyond a 3-year lease, or there's a problem with the industry or the branding, or by the way, this guy bought this thing and they can't transfer the name because of some other weird reason, whatever. Don't leave things to risk. Do all your due diligence and research early on. Here's another one that I always like to encourage people. I talk to sellers all the time. And I also talk to buyers. I say, hey, buyers, when you've got this money to invest, you don't want to put all your money down because you might need working capital. And they might even say, well, what's working capital? Well, that's the money you're going to have beyond putting the money down and beyond all your deposits that you're going to need to manage the business. The business might be netting you $200,000, but the first of the month you might have a lot of expenses and you might need to get through the rest of the month to get flat even and into a profitable zone. So, one of the people that might know how much working capital is the business owner. Again, this is a time to maybe go see the accountant saying, hey, what would the average person need for working capital? Some businesses are small and they only need a few $1,000s. I worked with Shell and Texaco as corporately, and we put business owners in time. And at that time, 12, 15 years ago, they needed about $35,000 in working capital beyond the expenses to cover the purchase of the gas and the fact of the rent. And it could be higher than that if they had a really high rent. We had locations where rent was $24,000 a month or $28,000 a month. So really get to know the details of working capital. It's not something you need to figure out as much. Don't go follow the formula. Find out from the seller and maybe find out from the accountant, and then go back to that buyer and say, given your situation and your terms, etc., maybe see what your research tells you and your accountant tells you. Okay, help with the terminology, due diligence in itself. I just worked with a client who's buying a pizza restaurant, and he went through this process, and then he said, Brian, I really didn't know what the term due diligence meant. I think I screwed up, and we walked through some of the things, and we made him feel a lot more comfortable. But he was afraid to say, I don't know what due diligence is. I don't know what working capital is. I don't know what these terms are. So a couple things you can do. You can share a glossary. You can open the door and say, hey, if you don't know something, and some of these terms seem to be uncomfortable with you, help me by asking me these things. If I can't get you the answer, I can point you in the direction of someone who can get you the answer. And you got to realize that there's some things you can answer and some things that are probably best left to an accountant or attorney or another professional. But there's an awful lot of things you can go through, and again, realize that your client, your seller, is going through an emotional roller coaster. This might be the biggest financial transaction that they are going through. It might be the biggest transaction that a buyer is going through too, and that we'll save that for a whole different conversation. But realize that a buyer might buy a business for $500,000. Well, they might own a house that's worth $500,000. But let me tell you, the economic experience with buying a business is that that business then might be spending off $200,000 a year, and they keep it for 20 years. That's $4 million plus the value of the business, and they're going to sell it for another $1 million later on because it'll be worth more. That's $5 million value ultimately, and I'm not even including the time value of money. This is a real big deal financially, both to the seller and to the buyer. So really do your research and be prepared and be kind and compassionate. I share this slide. I show this up on a number of different slides out there. A lot of businesses don't sell for a lot of different reasons. If you can be part of the experience that you're adding value to the seller, if you're helping them prepare their business so that it successfully sells, you're beating the odds that are there in the marketplace. Okay? Be amazing, change lives business by business, and do the right thing. Show integrity, show compassion, show courage to do the right thing all the way through. Look, I love to reach out to you. I love connecting with other folks in the industry. If you're getting started off, if you want to sort of dip your toe in the water by getting to know the industry or even working together with us, this is not a sales pitch to join Legacy Venture Group and BuyBizUSA, but it's certainly an offer to say hello out there, make great things happen regardless of where you are. And if you got some ideas on things we can share and improve, maybe you're an attorney, maybe you're the lease coach or somebody that does all kinds of different things in terms of advising and helping business owners, I'd love to hear from you too. This is Brian Stevens with BuyBizUSA and the Legacy Venture Group, selling America's best business. Reach out to me. Here's my phone number, and our website is BuyBizUSA.com. Thank you. Be amazing. Take care. Bye-bye.